Hi everybody and welcome to our Apprenticeship Service webinar today. We're going to be going and having a look at the benefits of using the Recruit and Apprentice tool in the Apprenticeship Service. And this session is aimed for our training provider colleagues. My name is Nick Duff from the Service Engagement team and I'll be doing the hosting for today. Can I do my usual reminder that I do at the start of all webinars and just let you know that the webinar is obviously being recorded, and can I remind you that by registering and attending today that you've given your consent and you're agreeing for the webinar to be recorded and to be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. If you feel that you've changed your mind regarding the consent, can I ask that you please dial off. And as for the recordings, what I'll do, I'll tell you later how you can access these towards the end of the session. Hopefully you'll all notice that you've all automatically been placed on mute, and you'll remain on mute throughout the webinar. So our plan today is that we're going to do a run through of what the benefits are for using Recruit and Apprentice, the Recruit and Apprenticeship Service, and also how it links to Find an Apprenticeship. We're also going to be giving you a demonstration of REA and the new functionality that we've just released, which some colleagues will talk to you about later. So we'll give you well, after the demo, what we'll then do is we'll discuss some of the hints and tips that you can consider when you're creating a vacancy, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. So after the Q&A session, once we're done with that, I'll let you know how you can access a handout for today's session, and on the handout we will give you all the key links that we'll be referring to during the session. If you've got any questions for the presenters, what I'd like to do is to pop them into the questions tab that you can find on your control panel. This should be on the right hand side of your screen. So what you're looking for is a heading called questions. If you click on that, you can put any of your questions in there. And what we'll try and do is we'll cover as many of the questions as we can during the Q&A session, and we'll aim to cover at the very least all the main points that you raise during the Q&A session, even if we don't get around to answering each individual question. What we will do though is we'll take away any of your unanswered questions and we'll put together some answers and we'll get those sent out to you by email in a few weeks' time. And also as well with questions, what we'll do is we'll share them with the presenters, with the dev teams, and with our user research colleagues so that they can take account of any of your insights through the questions as they continue to develop the service as well. What we won't do is we won't cover any questions that don't relate to today's topic, so keep them focused around Recruit and Apprentice. We're expecting our session to last for about 45 to 50 minutes, but we've scheduled 60 minutes in just in case we run long. And then can I also remind you that at the end of the session, as you leave the webinar, we'll direct you to a very short survey. We'd love to know what you thought about today's webinar, so please, if you can, take a couple of minutes just to answer a few quick questions and provide us with your feedback. Okay, so I'm joined today by quite a few colleagues actually, who are going to be doing the main inputs and our panelists on our Q&A session. So I've got Gemma Rolls, who is a senior policy manager from our apprenticeship participation team. She's replacing Carolyn Savage, who's unfortunately not able to make today's session. But Gemma will be running through some of the detail about Recruit and Apprentice and telling us why we're really keen for you to use REA to advertise your apprenticeship vacancies. And then we've got Jane Farrington and Siji Odunlami from the Apprenticeship Service delivery team, and they're the ones that are responsible for developing REA as part of the service. So they'll be running through a demo of REA for us. They'll be showing us through the main task list and how you can enter your vacancy details, and they'll be sharing with us a couple of the new developments that they've been working on in REA to make it easy for you guys to advertise vacancies that have got multiple locations or where you've got a national vacancy. And then we've got a few more colleagues joining us for the Q&A session. We've got Jasna Begum, who's the delivery manager in our youth apprenticeships team. We've got Hannah Bingham, who's a priority programs coordinator from our independent market oversight team. And we've also got Chris Lightwood and Emma Thomas from our REA delivery team as well. So got quite a few colleagues here to talk to you today. So big welcome to all of you. And I think that means that we're just about ready to start. Oh, actually, sorry, I've just remembered. It's Chris Lightfoot. I beg your pardon, Chris. I've written your name down wrong. Chris Lightfoot. So yeah, welcome to you all, and we're ready to start. So Gemma, I think I'm ready to hand over to you.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to say thank you for everyone for coming. We like to work very collaboratively with all our providers and employers providers on Recruit and Apprentice. And so these sessions are really valuable for us to get feedback. So please do use that question function as we go through, so we're able to pick those up for you. The system is very user-centric, and so we do use that feedback to enhance the system all the time. And so, yeah, it's really important to us that we receive your feedback. It's also worth noting that we've got quite a good mix of provider and employer providers online today. Some of you will be very, very familiar with the things in which we're going to talk through. So Recruit and Apprentice, the front-facing Find an Apprentice, which is used by the candidates to actually be able to look for vacancies. But in the pre-survey, a lot of you have told us that actually you're not aware of the service, or you haven't been aware of it in very great detail, and that you'd like to know a lot more of it. So what we're going to do is try and hit on a little bit for both people. So you'll see a demo of the service today that shows some of those new elements for you providers that are very used to it. But also, as Nick said, we'll share with you quite a few links that will help some of you that are just starting out on your journey to be able to understand actually, how do I get involved? How do I actually go about using the service? And there are some great videos that give you a step-by-step through into how you can use the Recruit and Apprentice service. So to start a little bit with, why is it important to us that you use the service? So one of the big ministerial ambitions is to have a one-stop shop for apprenticeships. And this is because we often get a lot of feedback, and research tells us that candidates find it very difficult to search and apply for apprenticeships when they're across lots of multiple sites, and that they would like a kind of one shop where they're able to look for apprenticeship opportunities within their localised areas. And so we've been working over the last couple of years to really try and increase the number of providers that are using and employers that are using Recruit and Apprentice. And in line with that, we also do, in a lot of our initiatives, we send candidates to find an apprenticeship, which is the front-facing element of Recruit and Apprentice. And so that what we do know is that when people do use it, they get a very good range of candidates that come forward. And often that pool is a lot more diverse than you might get through some of the recruitment agencies. So we use a lot of through our careers hubs, through our schools, through our colleges, through our careers advisors, we all reference through to find an apprenticeship. And it has a huge amount of traffic that goes through it. And so it's a really positive place to utilise for your employer recruitment. And so why have we reached out to kind of both sets of providers? So we monitor how many people are actually using the system. And we do this because we want to work with those providers that aren't, to understand why they aren't. And then the ones that are, to understand how we can better, create the system that works for them. And so in recent data, we've seen about 60% of training providers are actually using the system. And so we're keen to understand kind of why one provider don't make use of it, or they use it for kind of less than 25% of their recruitment needs. And we've seen a little bit of that through your pre-survey feedback. So thank you for that. And we will build on that. Just want to move across. So Nick said we're going to touch on a little bit of benefits to why we want you to use Recruit, why you want to use Recruit and Apprentice, and why it benefits you and your employers that you work with. So obviously it's free, it's government backed, so that makes it really secure, and it has a high level of quality checks. It goes through QA, but also you can pre-QA your vacancies yourself as well. It gives you an opportunity to do real end-to-end management. So not only is it advertising your vacancies, you actually manage your applications through there. So it gives you a good portal. It obviously is free to use, which does reduce those recruitment costs. The other thing that I would say is that a lot of people don't really understand that actually it's got quite flexible functionality. So if you are using other recruitment services, you can actually use RAA almost like a shop window. It allows you to advertise through there, pull those vacancies through, and it just gives you another area in which you can advertise, and it gives you a much wider candidate pool. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that you're actually, just because you're using one, you're very free to use lots of different recruitment pools. So just because you use RAA doesn't mean that you aren't able to go and recruit in other places. And as I say, often we can pull through from other sites, which makes it easier for providers and employers. It does really put the recruitment in your hands and in the hands of an employer provider rather than using a third party, because you're able to manage those vacancies yourself through to the end. And I think I touched on slightly that we do have a really huge demand for finding an apprenticeship from candidates, which is the front-facing end. And this particularly peaks at certain points in the year. And so around A-level results day, for example, GCSE results, and the National Apprenticeship Week, as I'm sure you can imagine, where we get a huge amount of people register, and the more vacancies that are available for them to be able to see gives them a real clear indication of what's available within their area. And so it's really helpful for those candidates to be able to see a good pool of vacancies. And it just, as said before, it allows you to reach a much wider audience. Nick touched on this a little bit, and I've sort of said it up front, is that it is a very user-based design. So it's very, system is a lot easier to use than I think people realise, and we do have some demonstration videos for that. But also it is under constant development, and this is where your questions really come into play, because we're always looking at, okay, this is, it's evidence-based change. So what you're going to see today is a demonstration of where we've had that. So where we've had really good feedback about what employers need to be able to see and how they would like to use Recruit differently. And that's led to a really positive change within the system. And we've had some really good, a few more of those over the last few months where we've got really good change within the system based on good provider and employer feedback. As I say, it gives you good vacancy flexibility, and then there's really just a factor around that kind of where it gets really high volumes. And so, yeah, A-level results day this year, there was over 300,000 views came into the site just in one day. So as I'm sure you can imagine, that's a really big candidate pool for your employers to be able to take from. A really good diverse range of candidates. And then the other real positive about it, and Nick will drop the details in right at the end, there is a live chat and telephone support service available around that, so Monday to Friday. And so that really helps employers and providers to be able to get live support to be able to help with those vacancies as they're loaded. And that's it for me for now, and I'm handing back to Nick.
Cool. Thank you very much, Gemma. It's really good to hear the sort of the clarity and the as to why we're asking people to use REA and the ministerial push to get that in place as well. So we're going to be moving over to the demo now. So we've got Jane Farrington lined up to go through the demo. I'll just bear with us 2 seconds whilst we hand over control of the screen so that we can see the demo. There it is. Okay, cool. So Jane, are you ready to kick off with your demo?
I am. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks, Jane.
Welcome, everybody. If you've been on the webinars before, you may have already met Sidgy and myself. I am the product manager for Recruit and Apprentice. So I help to decide what's going in and when, and keep everyone in the development team on track and building things that our end users are asking for. And Sidgy, who's going to be doing the demo with me today, is an amazing tester that works on our team. And he's the person that makes sure when we release anything into live that it all works perfectly and doesn't break any of the systems. So I'll do some talking up front and then you'll hear from Sidgy. So if you're new to Recruit at all, this is the home page that you would land on in your provider account. And as you'll see along the top toolbar, you've got home, apprentice requests, manage funding, manage your apprentices, and then recruit apprentices. So you can always access through there, but you'll also see on the page halfway down on the right hand side the recruit apprentices entry, and that once you've clicked that, that will take you through to our area of the service, which is recruit an apprentice. Now, if you're a provider and you want to recruit on behalf of an employer, you need to make sure that you've liaised with the employer and that they've given you permission to do the recruitment on their behalf. Now, as long as that's all done, then you'll be able to continue the recruitment. And this is the homepage of the recruitment area of the service. Now we have all these tiles on the page which are there to help you manage your vacancies once you've created. So at the top of the page, you'll see the green Create Vacancy button, which is where you would go if you were if it was your first ever vacancy. And all the numbers on these tiles would be 0. But if you start from the left top, the draft vacancies, so you can begin to create a vacancy and you can leave it there in draft and go back to it and fill it in as and when you need to. The next tile along is pending employer review. So when your employer gives you permission to create a vacancy, they can either give you permission to create the vacancy as a whole, or they can ask to review the vacancy before it goes live. And that's where you would see those vacancies that are waiting for your employer. The next one along is pending the Department for Education review. And that's where we send vacancies for quality assurance. So once you've completed your vacancy, it goes through to an external team who look at the quality of that vacancy to ensure that we haven't got anything in there that we shouldn't have, and then it will be posted live. Now, that quality assurance process takes less than 24 hours, but the SLA that we have with them is 24 hours. And so that's the longest that could be. Did you want to come in, Sidge?
Sure. Thank you, Jane. So as Jane's mentioned, what we would want to do today is walk through what the providers would see when creating a vacancy. What I have tried to do is create a demo vacancy already, so we're not walking through so much. So I go into draft as Jane's mentioned. I had to pick the first one. It loads. And what you should get when you click on create is you get a task list that will look like this, where it's split into 6 different sections. One will be vacancy summary, which would refer to everything about the vacancy and all the information about it. Then the second part, which talks about the employment details, which would be start dates and all the rest of all the information around those sort of bits. Then we've also got the third section as skills and qualifications, then information about the employer, then other information about the application itself. So any questions that you may want to ask the applicant that you'd want them specifically to answer before the application is revealed, and also an option to review and check and submit your vacancy. So it is quite a detailed list of things that would need to be completed as part of that vacancy. On the next page, I'll be able to show you exactly or replay the information that would have been entered in all the sections. So if I go on and say, check your answers, you'd have a full replay of everything that would have been entered. So the name of employer, vacancy title, training courses, and all other information related to it. And on there, you would have options to go in and change if you notice anything that you want to include or you may have missed out. There's always that option to go back and change it from there, or return back to the task list and click on the link relating to that specific area. What you'd also have on there is information about the employment details. So start dates, duration, and any other bits that you may have previously entered will be replayed back to yourself. But the big area that we wanted to talk about today essentially is locations and multiple locations, national and single locations. It's something that we've recently introduced. And on here currently, I have got this set up as multiple locations. So you'd see where it says, where's the apprenticeship available? It does say at more than one location, and then a list of all the locations that's been selected. I can go back and change that and go and select a single location. And you'd have them in a bullet point list of all the locations that that employer would have possibly that they want to recruit from. So if I were to select one of them and hit save, it will take us straight back to that list, and we can see the change in there with us indicating it's one single location and the location where that apprenticeship will be taking place. The other alternative is to go in and select across all of England. So if it's a apprenticeship that is across all of England, you can come in here and select that. We can put information about it, say remote working, save and continue. And that will be represented to them again, saying, it is across all of England, and also any other additional information that you may have been have entered. Following that, you'd have bits around, their requirements and their prospects, so skills that they require, qualifications, what the future holds for them, and other things that, they may want to consider as part of it. Following that, you've got about the employer, which will give information about the employer, the name, which as well, you can decide if you don't not want to display the name, there is an option to hide that employer's name and make it anonymous. So if I back and go back down there. So additional information, website, contact details, there are optional sections in there as well. You can choose to hide them or not present them to those users or to the advert. And then application website, which gives you option of either doing it on a separate website or using the Find Apprenticeship websites. You can enter all your information in there. Then we've got bits around the application. So we have a standard as part of the application. We have 2 set questions that would go out with the vacancy, but you then get these 2 additional questions which the provider can ask the applicants as part of the application process. So I've entered 2 questions in there, which would then be shown. So before we proceed, I would like to preview that vacancy before I submit. And on it, this gives you a replay of what exactly the vacancy would look like once it's been published and gone live. So you can proofread that vacancy, look through to see if there's anything that you may want to change again on there. But this is what presents when it does go live. So you'd see information about where they'll work, what they'll be doing at work, training, all the bits being replayed to yourself again. At the bottom of the screen, you have the option to submit the vacancy, change, or delete. So for the purpose of this, I would submit. And at that point, what it does is it goes to the QA team, which will then review that vacancy and then make it live or refer it if they do have any questions or any queries.
Sidge, before we move on, are we able to go back to the task list just for a second or not?
Yeah, we can. I believe I do have.
So I just want to talk you through just a tiny little bit about this task list. So it does look quite daunting initially when you see it, but once you select the first field, which would be name an employer. If it was a brand new vacancy that you were creating, as soon as you select save and continue, it walks you through each and every field, and they are simple one-step questions, as most gov.uk sites are, to handhold you really, to make your recruitment journey easier for you. They're only saying pre-completed because we have done put the data in for you, but it would walk you through each and every step so that you don't miss out anything before you finish your vacancy and preview it. Thanks, Sidge.
You're welcome. So once that's gone live, it then goes on to FA, which is what the apprentices would see, or essentially it would show them how to apply, where they apply from, and any other additional information relating to it. So on it, what I will do is you can always search for, if you know the specific vacancy you're looking for, you can search by the what, the where, vacancy reference number, or the company advertising it. You know, there is quite a range of bits that can be used to search. But in this instance, you can also search by browsing your interests, which will return results around the interests that you would have selected in that journey. But in this instance, I will just search without any entry. And what we've got is a list of the results that we would have, a sorting order here, which as default sets as new. And the first option on there is one of those ones that I previously created. This is one with multiple locations on. So you would see on here, we've got cybersecurity apprenticeship and location as London and 9 other locations. It would display 10 different adverts because that's London and 9 other locations. So we've got this one, and then same thing on there, that's another location, and now 9 others. So it makes it easier for people to select which one they want to apply for, and also that indication that it is multiple location apprenticeship. And there are filters on there which they can use to narrow down on what they want, apprenticeship level, job categories, disability schemes, and all of that. So it makes it easier to filter down and narrow down results. So if I select the first one, which we've got here now, so first thing it will display is title, employer name, and also all the locations where that apprenticeship is available. If it was a single location, it will just show a single location on there. If it was national, it will repeat to you that it's recruiting nationally. And similar to what you've seen already, the advert displays exactly just like the preview that was shown. So if I go ahead and apply, which is what the apprentice will be looking to do, I can hit apply for this apprenticeship. Because it's an account that I use quite often, once you've completed a single vacancy before, it stores your answers and it repeats them, because a lot of the questions are the same questions or generic. So, schools and colleges, training courses, jobs, and all that. It's essentially the same information. If there are changes, you do have the option to go in there and make any change to it or add additional information to it. But otherwise, it pre-imports it for you, so it's an easier flow. You're not having to repeat yourself every time you're applying for a vacancy. However, the preset 2 questions that I mentioned before are already there. With those as well, your previous answers are imported. But the 2 questions that you get to ask the applicant, those are not pre-imported because we never know what those questions might be. So they would always have to answer these. In this instance, I can answer that. So what do you want to know about? I'll just fill in pre-filled information in there. Bear with me.
And while Sidge is completing the pre-filled information, we did a lot of research with candidates to rebuild Find an Apprenticeship very recently, and we've had some fantastic feedback that they are finding it very easy to apply for positions on Find an Apprenticeship, and the fact that we are saving their answers and they're not having to re-input their qualifications and schools and training courses on every application is great. And they have the ability to save their vacancies and save their searches, so they can go back and have a look at any time. Sorry, Sidge, carry on.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. And what you would get once all that information has been filled and completed, then you get a green CTA showing up on here saying you can continue. If that was not completed, that continue option would not be available, and they would only see the save and finish later option. So if I continue, again, what we do is we replay their information back to them. So their name, address, telephone, contact number, email address, and all that information that was previously entered is replayed back to them. So they get that opportunity to review and make any changes if they wanted to. And then down the bottom, there is an option then to then submit. And once that's submitted, it goes back to the provider. And what you would see on that occasion, if I went back to the provider account now, is in this tile, we've now got in the new application section. Previously, it was counting as 6. We've now got 7 new applications. So if I went in there, that's the one that we've just gone into. It's got 1 new one. You can manage and then choose. So 3rd of April, 2025, you can see date where it's been applied for. You can go in. Essentially, the information that's been passed to the provider is replayed, and we can choose to either review, share with an employer, mark the application as interviewing, make successful, or make unsuccessful and give feedback. If I make successful on this occasion, what happens is the candidate is then notified that the application has been made successful. So I will switch back. And then for this candidate, which we were just looking at, if I go to my applications and then go to successful, that application is on there and it's showing, and they've been notified as well that the application has been successful. So that's the end-to-end flow of creating a vacancy, sending it to go live, and then an apprentice being able to apply for it.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sidge. If we could just go back to the home page of the provider, then we'll just be able to talk you through some additional tiles. So if if we go to the recruit area of Recruit an Apprentice, then we talked through the top tiles before we showed you the application process. Then Sidge showed you the new applications. And then the tiles below that are quite self-explanatory. We've got rejected vacancies. They're the vacancies that have come back from our quality assurance team that you need to take a look at because they haven't made the cut. We've also got 25 live vacancies that you are being told you've got live vacancies on Find an Apprenticeship at the moment. And then the employer reviewed applications, the tile below, and any of your closed vacancies. We are looking at improving this dashboard at the moment. So any feedback you have on that at all, we will happily take that away and have a look at that when we're doing our research. Now, at the bottom of the page, you can create a report which will give you information about all the applicants that have applied and the vacancies that you have. You can manage your emails, manage your recruitment emails, so you can decide when you get notifications about your vacancies and applications. And you can also use our API, which allows you to create multiple vacancies. You go through to our API portal. Most people would need a developer on their team, and then they would be given a key and they would be able to create vacancies using our API to save you going through this front end process. Well, I hope that's been helpful. Sidji did an amazing demo. Thank you very much, Sidji. And I'll hand over to Nick and we'll have a look at some questions.
Jane, just replay that API conversation for me again, please, just so I can make sure I've got it clear in my mind.
Okay, so if you wanted to create an advert that you didn't want to use our front end, you didn't want to go through that task list, and you had developers within your organization, you can click the create, use the API link on that page. You'll be given a key, and then your developers will be able to create the vacancy virtually using code to save anyone having to go through each page of that interface.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And then just before we move on, because I know this gets asked a lot, and when we did a similar webinar last year, we had this a lot. Can you just very simply explain the difference between recruit an apprentice and find an apprenticeship and where they both sit?
So recruit an apprentice is the back end of find an apprenticeship. So recruit sits within an employer and a provider's account. That they will always be there. They're always available, even if you don't ever use them, but they're within the Apprenticeship Service account. And then once those vacancies have been created by the provider or the employer, then they go through the quality assurance process and then they end up on the front end, which is the find an apprenticeship. So that's for candidates. As Gemma explained, we have career advisors, we have schools, we have lots of people using Find an Apprenticeship and signposting candidates to look for vacancies on Find an Apprenticeship. We also have just released an ability to sort by date on vacancies. So if it was a school leaver that couldn't apply for a vacancy initially, they could sort to maybe September or October and see what's available then. And it's encouraging employers and providers to advertise vacancies early so that candidates can see them before they finish their education. I think that's answered it, Nick, but let me know.
Yeah, it has. Thank you. I just wanted to make that point really clear for people, because I know that was asked before quite a bit, just to get that relationship, because we always talk about recruit an apprenticeship and recruit an apprentice and find an apprenticeship, and we link them together, but we don't often explain really clearly. So I think, Jane, that's really helped. Thank you very much. We're not going to move just to the questions just yet. We've got Gemma coming back, and she's going to run us through some of the hints and tips to help you guys submit great vacancies.
Hi guys. So Jane touched on the fact that first things first, if you are new and you don't already have permissions from your employer, that is your first thing that you would need to do. Often providers offer a service to employers, particularly to SMEs, that they're able to recruit on their behalf. Now, sometimes an employer might say to you, oh, I don't need that, or I've already got my own system or service. And we do see that on some of our feedback, and I think that's fine. I think it's getting that employer to understand that they can recruit in more than one place, and that when you might be able to do some of that elements for them if they give you permissions, and often that can be quite helpful. And also it helps you to kind of work together to be able to kind of establish that vacancy between those kind of parts. So first thing would be that you need to get employer permission to set up a vacancy on their behalf, and so you do that. And then the next thing, and I think Sidney touched on this when he looked at the different categories, is really making that advert as clear as possible. So that's making sure that you really include that kind of that location detail. What's that expectation? So is that going to be an element of in the office, out of the office? What does that training schedule really look like? How much of it is on, in the provider location, for example, or a university location? And what does that look like? So does that look like block release? So it's always helpful on your advert to clearly set out that expectation for the individual so they can understand whether or not they're going to be attending Friday one day a week or on block release or however that might look like in that particular apprenticeship, and where those two locations are so they can get a really good gauge of that distance to travel and whether that's right for them as an individual. Particularly that becomes really clear in sort of rural areas where they might need to travel a little bit further. One thing we would always encourage is to make sure that you're using really clear and accessible language. And this is particularly important where you use things like industrial, like speech jargon, some, things like acronyms. We're really guilty of it as a government. And if you use them in adverts, often they're not understood by people that don't necessarily work in that industry. But particularly we understand that it's really difficult for young people to understand that kind of industry jargon or where particular acronyms are used. So always try and make sure it's accessible, and it's accessible for any candidate that might be reviewing those vacancies. Quality check your vacancy prior to submission. So you showed you a really good screen there where you're able to run through it. It's always worth just doing a bit of a quick check before it comes to our QA, because if you can head off any potentials there, then it makes the QA process so much quicker. And as Jane said, it's sort of always within that 24, but it can often make it a lot quicker if you've already done some of those checks and balances yourself. So use the built-in validation that you've been seeing on your screens to be able to show, actually, does everything look right? How is that going to display for somebody looking at that vacancy? Can they clearly see all the information that they need to be able to see to be able to make a decision about whether that's the right vacancy for them? It's always worth thinking about, what actually are the real prior learning requirements for a vacancy. Often we see things that actually aren't needed for that particular apprenticeship. Now, it might be that that's because that's what the employer has required, and that's fine, but always be considerate about, actually, is this restrictive? Does this mean that actually some people potentially could apply that aren't going to apply because we're putting on requirements that might not necessarily be a requirement of that apprenticeship? So always think about that. And then, just really, what does a young person or an adult or any candidate really need to see? And then, so what makes a vacancy appealing? So I think first, to set really clear expectations for somebody that's looking at it, so they can see really quickly, looking at the job summary, looking about what's expected of them, looking about what their educational needs are, and then also what they will get out of it at the end. And if you make that really clear, often people can make really quick decisions about whether that's really an appealing vacancy for them. Prioritize that kind of high level information. So for me, that's really about so what is the salary? What are any additional benefits? What's the holiday? Any potential bonuses? What's going to really appeal to somebody looking at a job advert? So what does that really look like? What's the interest for that? And then just think about, what would I want to know? So if you're creating an advert, what would you want to know if you were looking at a job advert? What might that mean? The levels bit is a bit difficult. Often, young people in particular, and maybe not so much older apprentices, often get stuck on the idea that they have to go and do something that is the next level up to what they're currently doing. So it's often worth just thinking about how you describe some of that and within your advert, and making sure that it looks more about, this is the competence and what is needed for this particular apprenticeship, rather than really focusing on that levels. And that's it from me, Nick, and I'm handing back to you.
Okay, thanks Gemma, and thanks Jane, thanks Tiji, for great inputs today. They were really helpful. Thank you guys. So let's move on to some of the questions that everybody's been submitting for us, and thank you everybody for doing that. We've got some really great questions lined up here to ask the guys. So let me kick off. Jane, I've got a couple of questions for you. There's a question there about will there be an option to display the salary as an hourly rate instead of yearly, as some employers want that functionality?
We do We allow you to input an hourly rate when you're creating a vacancy, but then we change it into annual or yearly once it goes onto the advert.
Okay, cool. And then the question about word counts in some of the boxes. So obviously there's a limit to the amount of text that you can add into those boxes, and there's a suggestion and a question about can those word counts either be increased or can they be removed because it's limiting what employers want in there for the job role?
We can always look at increasing the word count or removing the word count. The word counts were input in the first place because in user research, that's what came out, that people don't want adverts that are way too long because it puts people off from applying because they don't get through the rest of the advert. But we'll have a look at the sections that are being referred to in the question, and we'll be able to make sure that we can see whether or not we can see whether any other users are requiring an increase in the word count or a removal. So it's always possible because we iterate the service constantly, which is why we say, please give us your feedback. So anything that we can change can, if it's as simple as a word count, can be changed quite quickly. It's just that we wouldn't change it for one person. We would need to make sure that we are helping the rest of our users and the people that are reading the advert.
Yeah, I think the two areas that for everybody else's benefit, the two areas that were referred to particularly were the company benefits and skills sections, I think, as being potentially particularly tight for that provider anyway. Okay, thank you, Jane. Chris, a couple of questions for you. So one about the multiple location thing. So if you use multiple location, but then one of those locations needs to be removed, can you edit the post? Or do you have to close it and make a whole new post?
Cheers, Nick. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Chris. I'm one of the designers of Recruit an Apprentice and Find an Apprenticeship. And firstly, just let me say thank you for all your questions. Even if we don't get through all of them, we're reading all of them and we'll take them and we'll use them to guide future product development. So every single comment I've just been reading through. So thank you for sharing them all. This one on multiple location functions. So just to remind you, I was asking if I create an advert with multiple locations and then decide I need to remove one of those locations, do I need to make a new advert? So if that advert isn't live yet, you can very easily just change the locations on the advert before it goes live. That's very easy to do. Once you set those locations, they're not locked, you can change it before it goes live. If the advert has gone live, you will need to take down that advert and repost it with those fewer locations. And that's just because some people might have applied for that location that you have decided to remove. So when you're making big changes like that to an advert, we just prefer for people to take it down, add a new one so that candidates are really clear what it is that they've applied for.
Okay, cool. There was another question about locations that I think there was somebody not quite getting it. They're saying that they, if you choose more than one location, does this refer to an actual employer site if they have more than one? So if they were looking for, a site in the same town or in different sites in different towns, what can you just, in a nutshell, just sum up the multiple location bit again?
Yeah, so that is exactly right. So maybe the best way to talk about this is talk about how it used to work, which is if you were, say, an optician's and you had 4 branches and you decided that you wanted to take on an apprentice and you weren't sure which branch you wanted to take on that apprentice, any of them were good, you had to sit down on our system and create 4 separate adverts. The idea with the multiple locations feature is now you can just add multiple locations to one advert. So you've only got to create one advert, and then people who are looking in any of those 4 places, Plymouth, Exeter, Bristol, maybe I'm showing my Southwest bias here, they'll see them as they search. So it's a way of increasing the visibility of an advert without you having to do it 4 times over. So yes, each location is an employer site where there is an apprenticeship possibly available. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. There was a question about inputting the job description and that being the most detailed part of the vacancy and a very small box. But I think we've covered that in Jane's comment about increasing word counts, and we'll certainly take that as one of the areas that we look at to see whether or not we can make any improvements for you in that area. But I think we'll skip down to another question, Chris, for you. Can the set of candidate questions, or can the candidate questions by the service also be shown alongside new questions when advertising, so they don't accidentally ask the same question?
Yeah, this is something that we're looking at the moment. So just to reiterate something that Jane and Siji showed you in the demo, if you decide to let people apply through Find an Apprenticeship, we ask 2 questions by default. We ask the candidates what their skills and strengths are, aka what are they bringing to this apprenticeship, what sets them out as a candidate, and then we ask them a second question, which is what interests you about this apprenticeship, where we ask them why do they want to work specifically for you, why do they specifically want to be a business administrator or a field technician. Those questions are asked on every application form we process through Find an Apprenticeship. You then get the ability to ask a couple of extra questions if you're in a medical environment, you might just want to ask candidates and confirm them that they're okay with the sight of blood or something like that. But we do ask these 2 key questions on every application. We're working on making sure that people are more aware of those 2 questions. But now I hope everyone on this call is aware that those 2 questions are asked by default when you accept through Find an Apprenticeship.
Cool, thank you. Jane, interesting question here about the use of Recruit an Apprentice or Find an Apprenticeship. Is it in the funding rules that providers have to use it or offer the service to their employers?
Now, that's a question I don't know whether I actually do know the answer, but it is not compulsory to be funded for an apprenticeship to use our service. So it may guide you to say to use Recruit, but it's not compulsory.
Okay, thank you. It's been a long time since I've read the funding rules cover to cover, to be fair, but I think you're right. I'm not sure that it's in there, but certainly I don't think there's any compulsion to make providers use.
Nick, I can pick it up if you want.
Oh, Gemma, go on, excellent.
Yeah, so it isn't in the funding rules. You're absolutely right. We did have a couple of years ago, we were asked by ministers whether we could mandate providers. And obviously, because it's a tripart agreement between the provider, the employer, and the learner to take an apprenticeship, obviously we can't say that all providers have to advertise all vacancies through the service, because it would be an unfair expectation on them if the employer didn't want that service. So what we do is we do encourage providers to do it. We do track it, but we also do ask providers to send us a declaration as to whether they are or they're not as part of signing up. And as part of their sign up process in the future, we also will be giving them some information about RAA and why it's positive and why they should be using it in the future. But yeah, it's absolutely not mandated within the funding rules.
Cool, thank you. And I think you've also pointed out the quite heavy use that Find an Apprenticeship gets during the course of the year, and especially around key points when people are looking for to start apprenticeship. So it is a really having your vacancies displayed through Find an Apprenticeship is a really good place to get potential candidates. So I think it's certainly worthwhile. Okay, moving on. Chris, for you, a question. Assume that the share application with employer button is new. Does this allow the employer to know and see the entire application, including the contact details?
Yeah, so this sharing applications button we added, it's a little bit new. It's been in there for a couple months, maybe. I can't remember when we launched it. So we know that when you are in charge of recruiting for an employer, at some point you need to start showing application forms to employers. So that share with the employer button means that you don't have to copy and paste them into Word documents and send over emails. You press that share an application button. There's also a share multiple button in the interface too. it packages up the application and it sends it all over to the employer. So the employer can then go into their digital apprenticeship service account and look at those applications. We decided to make those blind recruitment applications. So when the employer opens them, they'll see the user's qualifications, they'll see the answers they've written to those questions I was talking about earlier. They don't see the contact information yet. At the bottom of the screen, there is a button that says, do you want to interview this applicant? Yes, no. If the employer selects yes, you'll get a notification. You'll see in your apprenticeship service account that the employer wants to interview that person. Simultaneously, the contact information and that applicant's name becomes visible to the employer. So the idea there is, when we did research, is we found out sometimes you as the training provider will organize interviews, sometimes the employer will organize interviews. So we wanted to create a system where you could see that the employer wanted to interview that person, but if the employer is interviewing these people on their own, they have all the contact information. So that was a bit of a long-winded way of saying, yes, if you use that sharing application button, the employer will end up in a position where everyone they want to interview, they will have the contact details for.
Cool, thank you. And then while I've got you, a couple of questions about the best way to link any adverts that are created through RAA to either the training provider's own website or through other recruitment systems. So what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so Find an Apprenticeship, if you want to link to Find an Apprenticeship adverts on your website, if you go onto the vacancy on Find an Apprenticeship and just copy the URL, that's a stable URL. It uses the vacancy number in the URL. You can just copy and paste that and put it as a link. If you have someone who's really technical on your team, you can use our APIs, which is a way of pulling through the data from Find an Apprenticeship onto your website, where you can then do fancy formatting things. If you talk to someone who understands that more than I do, they'll be able to help you. Also, what you can do on Find an Apprenticeship, we get a lot of people looking for apprenticeships on our platform. You can create an advert and then select for people to apply through your recruitment service instead. So you might have an advert on your web page, you might have your own way of handling applications, your own system and service for doing that, and you can still create an advert on Find an Apprenticeship, but then that Apply Now button doesn't take the candidate to our form, it takes them to your form on your website. So you still get the plus of getting all the eyes and all the attention that's on Find an Apprenticeship, but you can route them through your own recruitment platform and keep working how you want to work.
Cool. And then one more question for you, Chris, and then I've got a question for Jane. I think I probably need to wrap up questions then. It's a great question, to be fair. How do we encourage applicants to stop using AI for their answers?
I don't know. That's something that we need to take away and think about. But thank you for putting that in as a question, because that is something that will go away, and it's good to know that that's something you're concerned about. But what we do at the moment is, when the users answer those questions, is we do give them like some tips and some guidance. We do bullet point out, like, write about these skills, write about why you care about working for this company. Yeah, I guess that's the most we can do, is just try and coach the user into writing a correct answer. But we'll take that away and we'll have a little think about it.
Cool, thank you, Chris. And that's the same with a lot. There's been a lot of great feedback in some of the questions and suggestions for service development. So yeah, absolutely, we'll be looking at those. Jane, the last question I think is for you. Is there anywhere where a provider can access a list of the information that's required for the vacancy, so that they can get that information or share that information with an employer when they have their initial conversations about recruitment?
Yeah, definitely. So when I showed you the Recruit an Apprentice dashboard and the Create Vacancy, that shows you the full task list when you go on there, and that's each question that you'll need to answer. So if you want to, you can always take a screenshot of that, or you can go through those questions, and there it will give you everything up front that you need to see, and then you can share that with your employer.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's the end of the questions. I'll just move on and cover some of the next steps if I can. I wanted to remind everybody about our YouTube channel, which is at DFE Sector Comms. As you can see on the screen, we've got 3 playlists on there. And the recording of today's session will be on the Apprenticeship Service webinar recording playlist in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. And we also have all of our other support videos covering different functionalities of the Apprenticeship Service in the Using the Apprenticeship Service playlist, and videos created to support the delivery of apprenticeships available in Apprenticeship Support Videos playlist. So have a look at that channel, subscribe to it, click on the bell icon, and then you get alerts when new content is uploaded. And then on to the next slide. Okay, on this slide, we've got some links for you as to where you can go to access support. So there's a PDF document that we've put into the handout section that you can download now from the control panel, so that you don't have to scribble any of the details down whilst they're on the screen. But obviously, ways to stay up to date about apprenticeships are, as ever, apprenticeships.gov.uk, which is a brilliant place for information. There's also the Further Education and Training Providers Community Forum, which is a peer-led discussion forum for providers. I know many of you will be aware of that. And to register for any of our future webinars, I've got the link on there as well. And also, by the end of this week, you'll be able to access a different recording, the same recording, but another recording of today's webinar from that link as well, on demand. So that recording will be available for about a month whilst we're getting the final version ready and published on YouTube. If you've got any specific queries about the Apprenticeship Service, you can use the self-service support tool, or you can email the support team as well. Their contact details are on the handout. And then finally, we've got a link where you can sign into your Apprenticeship Service account, and a Find an Apprenticeship link, which is the page where, as we mentioned, potential applicants can go and view the vacancies that you guys will have entered into RAA. Okay, so that's it. That brings us to the end of the session. Sorry I've run over by a couple of minutes. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks to all of the presenters today for their insights and knowledge, and for their expertise sharing the service. And remember, as you leave, please, if you would, complete the short survey, because we really want to understand how you responded to today's information. So thank you very much for that, and bye everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Nick, could I just interject? Jane wanted to just come in just at the end really quickly, so if we could just get Jane on.
Okay, so don't leave yet, guys. Jane.
Sorry. I wanted to say thank you all for your questions, because there are so many, but I've seen a lot of questions that we haven't been able to get to, and they're around sharing applications between employers and providers. Now, I know we released this functionality last year, and it was a very complex build, and there have been an awful lot of teething problems with these. Now, we have tried to address all of the issues with sharing applications with your employers and receiving them back. So it's a plea really to anybody that has put a question in about that. We are addressing it, and please raise a support ticket on anything that you see that you're not happy with on sharing applications, so that we can make improvements for you.
Okay, thank you, Jane. That's a really good comment to add in at the end. But yeah, so yeah, we're done. I think that's it. So thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.